Myths about sex addiction. I can't wait to get into this topic. That's what we're going to talk about today. Now, if you are new to our YouTube channel, please subscribe, hit the bell so you can be notified, and also the discussion box, hit that. I want to hear your questions. This is a big topic. It affects millions and millions of men and women. So please ask your question and stay tuned. Myths about sex addiction. I want to talk about this because this comes up a lot. The first myth is it doesn't exist. I remember I was doing Dr. Phil and there was another professional saying, it doesn't exist. Even though there's been treatment centers for sex addiction for 30 years, I've helped thousands and thousands of men get free from sexual addiction and see incredible changes of life. We have seen an incredible movement of 12-step groups across the world with sexual addiction. So there's so much validating information that there is such a thing as sex addiction. Now it exists, it's real, and you know one. The number of men and women who struggle with sex addiction is astronomical. So these myths, you might want to understand. So let's get to the second one. It's about perverts. It's those really extreme situations. You know, the guy in the white coat who's going to the bookstore, that's a sex addict. Now let me tell you, that might represent about 2% of sex addicts. Most are normal guys and gals who are at home looking at pornography, you know, hooking up with people through different social media stuff, getting into all kinds of sexual behaviors. But most of them, it's masturbation and pornography. They go to work, they look like you, they have families, they have businesses, and they have a sex addiction. So it's not about the extreme cases out there of people getting arrested, although that can happen. The majority of people are in the very early stages of sexual addiction, and that by itself can be so damaging to them and to the spouse. The spouse of someone struggling with sex addiction is hugely impacted. We did a whole book on partner betrayal trauma and the real trauma that women go through if they find that their husband has a sex addiction. It's massive. That all by itself validates that it's real and it exists. Number 3 myth, it's an excuse for bad behavior. Now, I've been dealing with sex addicts for over 30 years. There's no excuse for the behavior. Sex addiction does not say you're not responsible for your behavior. You're 100% responsible for your behavior. Otherwise, you can't heal from sex addiction if you're not responsible for your behavior. I've been sober for over 35 years. Okay, I took responsibility for my behavior, changed my behavior, and I haven't acted out in over 35 years. No masturbation, no porn, nothing outside my marriage. I have a polygraph in my office to verify that. So it's totally possible. Now, what sex addiction says is the addiction, the endogenous opiates, the attachment to the object world can hijack your sexual desires, and you have a strong desire to act out in an object way as opposed to a relational way. Now that can be healed. That can be reconnected to a relational outlet, and it's not permanent. So the choices that lead up to that influence are 100% the person's, and the person who decides to recover can change those choices and change the outcomes. So it is not an excuse for bad behavior. Number 4, it's the woman's fault. She's not having enough sex. She's not doing this. She's not doing that. Listen, it's not a woman's fault if a man drinks. It's not a woman's fault if a man overworks. It's not a woman's fault or a man's fault if their spouse has any type of addiction. Alcohol, drugs, sex, food, work, volunteering, whatever they're into, gaming. You can't blame a spouse if someone wants to spend 20 hours a week gaming. Okay, the spouses never are responsible for a sex addiction. Now they're impacted like we talked about, but they're not responsible for that. It wouldn't matter who they married, what they look like. A sex addict would be a sex addict no matter what. Those are independent variables. So if you've ever been blamed, if you're a woman watching this, you've been blamed that you don't do enough or the stimulus they're doing over there has nothing to do with you. Now the other news is you can't really help them heal. They need to make that responsible choice themselves. Now the 5th myth is it can't be cured. Once you're a sex addict, you're always a sex addict. Well, I'm living proof that ain't true. I've been free for over 35 years and I've seen thousands of men and some women get well from sexual addiction permanently. Okay? Now, it's nothing you can go back to like an alcoholic. You don't go back to the drug, the porn, the altered state, the fantasy world, but more like people who struggle with food addictions. You don't stop having food. You actually learn how to have food right and have it healthy. And the same thing, if I could talk to any sex addict and say, listen, your sex will improve so much better if you get free and sober and well, you won't ever go back to porn. It is so not as good as relational, powerful, connected sexuality, okay? These are some myths about sexual addiction. Sex addiction is real. It affects millions and millions of men and women. The men who are stuck in sexual addiction impacts their wives significantly. The partner betrayal trauma is real. And if you're a partner, please get some information on that. Partners Healing from His Addiction is a great book to start with. There's support groups. We have Facebook groups for partners, okay? Another thing that can impact this is if they're a sex addict, they might have intimacy anorexia where they're not having sex with you. That's a whole nother problem that can come up that legitimizes that sex addiction is real because it has this known secondary effect on a lot of men in their marriage. Now, if you're a man watching this and you know you're a sex addict, you've tried to stop, you're out of control, you've had consequences, you still use, you lie about it, it's a secret world, you believe if someone really knew who I was, they would not love me, you're stuck. I've been there. And you can get some change if you make some change. Get some information. You can go to sexaddict.com. Lots of material there to get some information, get a telephone session, get in a group, get counseling. Come here and do an intensive for 3 to 5 days. We've seen so many men get well. It's amazing. If you want to heal, you can. Now, these myths are out there in the culture and they're propagated in magazines and blogs and all that kind of stuff. But for over 30 plus years, this is what I do every day, 5 days a week, is see men and women get free, women heal from the trauma, their marriage is restored, and having the best sex of their life, having the best emotional and spiritual intimacy of their life. This thing's real, and so are the solutions.